This week on Forward.
So the economy, to me, you're told inflation's going down and jobs are going up, but I don't know if anyone's lived experience reflects that. A 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment in Manhattan, over 800 square feet. That is baseline. Cheapest you'll find, $7,000 a month. Baseline.
Woo.
And that, God
Really?
forbid you want...
Oh my gosh. That's what's making everyone freaking miserable. Housing is unavailable or unaffordable. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast a very familiar face and voice. Well, it's well done. Zach Grauman. Welcome back, Zach.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my show.
Welcome
With
back
special
to
guest
the
Andrew
Zach
Yang.
and Zach show.
What's up, man? You upgraded your digs.
Yes.
Kind of nice in here.
From that other shithole. No, so what? So this episode is actually going to come out April 1. So I thought we might make an April Fool's thing of it and say all sorts of crazy shit like I'm RFK's running mate and Nicole Shanahan
Congratulations.
is not. Yes.
She's better looking than you, man.
Kennedy Yang 24. Sounds like a model. Kennedy Yang.
That ticket would surely help Trump, I think. I think you'd pull the moderate right. I don't know.
No, I mean, it's one reason why if I were to run, I'd be much more likely to screw something up than help something, which is one reason. Which is one reason I was so glad to back our guy, Dean Phillips. So, Zach, you have many things to catch our people up on, including how's married life? How was it being the co-campaign manager of insurgent Democratic presidential candidate Dean Phillips, who... And I wrote this recently in a newsletter. So Dean, wow, like he got short shrift the whole time. I mean, 20% in New Hampshire after 10 weeks of campaigning was an incredible accomplishment. If independents had been able to vote in that primary, he gets 45% easy. If you look at it, there were clearly 100,000 independents who voted in the Haley Trump affair to try and weaken Trump. A focus group in Michigan, after they walked people through the candidates, over 50% chose Dean and the Democratic field. The problem is that no one in South Carolina or Michigan or any other state, for that matter, had ever heard of Dean Phillips. And so in New Hampshire, that got alleviated via $6 million in TV ads and some local press. But there was not that sort of campaign in any other state. And so he receded very quickly into the low single digits and then dropped out. But people don't realize how on the cusp the whole thing was.
Yeah. I'll always respect Dean Phillips because he's saying what you and I have been saying for a while.
And he actually ran. He actually did something about it.
He did something about it.
Suppose these other wusses who are all like
us that talk about it.
No. I mean, at least, dude, there are levels to this. I mean, we would say it out loud, which, by the way, there are like myriad people who thought I just wouldn't even say it out loud.
Correct.
With a microphone on them.
Yep.
But there are a bunch of people that knew that a campaign like Dean's was very positive. Mark Leibovich in The Atlantic was one of the people who just like, I actually think this campaign has a really good rationale. And they just didn't run because they didn't think it was going to be in their political interest. It was clearly not in Dean's political interest. I mean, he gave up his congressional seat that he could have held forever because he thought the country needed an upgrade in the Democratic ticket. And so, freaking guy put his money where his mouth is, put himself on the line.
Yeah. It was, so, you learn a lot when you do things like this. I'm a big believer in, you do things that excite you. And the older you get, the harder it is to find something that excites you. So when you get something that's like, wow, that's interesting to me, you got to follow that. And the older you get, the harder it gets, in my opinion. I'm 36, so that's my experience so far. It gets harder and harder.
36, been married for all of 5 months.
It's August, man.
And he's already like, it's harder.
It's harder to
get excited.
I will say this, like I wrote about this in my book. It was like, politics, particularly presidential politics, is an exercise in the attention economy. And there's this theory in presidential politics, since it's been true since Obama, but you talk about Carter and even Clinton a bit, where you go and you win and perform well in the early states, call it Iowa, New Hampshire in particular, but even South Carolina and others in Clinton's case. But and you do well there and you ride that momentum. Like there's a lot of candidates, a lot going on, but if Iowa picks you or New Hampshire says you're a legit candidate, then you can skyrocket you into national prominence and success. And that's always been the reason for the early states, because they don't have many delegates. They actually don't matter in delegate.
Yeah, they're small enough you could maybe...
and you can retail it up.
Yeah.
And they have this infrastructure to meet the candidates, et cetera. But what's happening in the attention economy, and I missed this when I wrote the book, was...
Long Shot.
Great. Yeah. Wonderful book. Should have won the Pulitzer. Should have been on the bestseller.
Pulitzer, no. Bestseller, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Well, that's not the point. The point is, it was okay to write. But what I was talking about in the book is it's tough to get people to pay attention. And what's happening is we're starting to care less and less. And after, like the folks in Michigan or South Carolina or Nevada or these Super Tuesday states, they don't give a shit what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire. And you kind of saw this in 2020 where Pete Buttigieg won Iowa, technically, or pretty close, and did pretty well in New Hampshire.
Very well.
And then he gets to South Carolina and Super Tuesday and has nada. Also, zero momentum.
Also, Nevada blanked him too.
Yeah.
Nevada and South Carolina, to your point, pretended like the other states didn't happen.
Yep.
But one major component of both the skyrocketing wave effect and what happened to Dean is the press. Is that the press used to have much more clout. And so if the press then said, hey, look at this person that emerged from New Hampshire, then I was like, oh, I guess that's the thing.
Yep.
Now the press is much, much weaker, but to the extent they have strength, what they did with Dean was they just pretended he didn't exist. He got a grand total of, I think, one MSNBC appearance in months of campaigning, despite being a sitting Democratic member of Congress who could easily have been booked on MSNBC if he weren't running for president.
And he's on the Council of Foreign Affairs during a war in the Middle East. Like, there's plenty of reason to have it on anyway.
And so what he does in a place like New Hampshire, if the press just blots it out or ignores it, then you don't get much of that trampoline effect, and the trampoline is not what it used to be.
So what you then have, what happens is it's a primary, so it's not a general election, so not that many people vote. You're talking about 1% to 3% of the state voting, and 20% of the party at most, right? They vote. They're voting on name ID. They haven't heard any other candidate, and so all the numbers of Biden support's really soft, turnouts at record lows, et cetera. But Biden wins all of them, right? So it shows he's like, 93% of South Carolinians voting for Joe. That's what it looks like to the press.
I mean, yeah. What percentage of total South Carolinians voted, or even Dem voters?
Right? It's 4%. Tiny, right? Some version of that, single digits for sure. So it's like this. So that's what happens, right? If you're,
dude, we were in South Carolina in the lead up. And, they were defeating essentially nobody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they were crowing, being, look, our person defeated nobody with record low turnout. Yippee! And there was like something very, very odd about it. That they had buses and some other thing. There was like a kind of a show.
It was a
show primary.
Democrat buster. Yeah, it's really crazy. And so I wrote in the book that this was this new normal and these new ways to run, and like the attention economy was an advantage for the outsiders. And it maybe was for a little bit, but it's turned into also an advantage for the machine. It's turned into an advantage of if you have the seat of power and you have a version of the name ID, you've done the party apparatus to get to the sitting Senate seat or congressional seat or governorship, et cetera, that name ID and existing just track record of being an elected is more and more powerful because no one's paying attention. They're like, oh, I've heard of that guy, that sort of thing. So it was, look, I mean, it was a wildly different race you do it at last minute, right? I went into an existing operation, man. You didn't get to recruit your people, and you recruited as many as you could. You deal with who you have, and everybody there was like they're warriors, right? They're diving into something with a long shot, and and you're scrambling, you're trying to put together, and there's no apparatus to plug into, right? There's no debates, there's no candidate features, there's
it
made
me reflect positively on my experience 4 years ago, where at least I had talk shows I could go on that would have me on. I had debates like that. There was a whole process, and without it, it would have been much, much harder. So another reason why I'm very proud of you and the campaign, to the Dean, our campaign obviously, but the Dean Phillips campaign. I was up in New Hampshire. It was magic. You could feel the electricity, the buzz. It was. Thank you, New Hampshire. It was great to see some of you again.
Really had some legs.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But fast forwarding now, so you have Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee, Donald Trump, the Republican nominee, and most people I talk to who are objective and not Trump fans at all would agree that if that election gets held today, Trump wins. And so then the question is, can that change by November? And the arguments for the Biden campaign are things like, hey, people will realize what a jerk Trump is and get turned off. Possible. They also now have a giant money advantage, and they're starting to spend that money. So check it out. Joe Biden has a positive State of the Union, then embarks on a swing state tour, and now they're spending $30 million on ads in swing states. I was just in Pennsylvania.
A lot of Joe ads?
And there are Joe ads up the wazoo, and people are seeing them and saying things about them. And so here is the major question that we all if you are concerned about who's going to win in November, want to figure out what's happening, the thing to do is see what's happening to the numbers at the end of April. Because if $30 million in, you do not see a bump in Joe's numbers in the swing states, or even nationally, but let's say the swing states in particular, it's going to go from anxiety to the sky is falling on the Democratic side. Because, and here's the major thing, is that money's great. You'd rather have it than not have it. You'd rather have more of it than less of it. And Trump is spending money on legal stuff and is distracted, and they're behind significantly by tens of millions of dollars. But does the money move the needle? And there's a $30 million experiment being run right now in the swing states. Will the money boost Joe's numbers? Now, there is a theory you could have of the case, which I'm going to say might be my theory.
Okay.
Is that at this point, voters know who these two dudes
Correct.
are.
That's my theory.
Have made up their minds, on the economy, and it's going to be very, very difficult for a piece of information or an advertisement to be like, oh yeah, wait a minute. Like that guy, I forgot he's the president. Like I like that, or it's like this. So this cake may be baked, but But if you want to see what the heck is going on, wait till late April and then see what's happening in the swing states and nationally. If Joe has gotten a meaningful bump,
Jeff Weaver, who was Bernie's campaign manager in 2016 and was an advisor on Dean campaigns, I got to know him a bit. He would say. If you put up a political ad and it doesn't move the needle, he would say, well, they just don't like the cookies. You bake the cookies, you made the cookies, they're delicious, but the people you're selling to them, they just don't like them. Nothing you can do. They don't like your cookies. And that's possible. It's either already baked or, so I'm on the impression like Biden's, I don't think Biden's going to win right now. And the reality is things can change and do change, right? So you're talking about you have an attorney in politics between now and November. For examples, between COVID or vaccines are both type of game-changing things.
You're talking about the next 7 months. I do remember 2020 that did happen.
Or 2008, Obama was maybe gonna win this thing, right? He was still dogging out with Hillary, and then the financial crash in September. So things happen. But here's where we stand right now, and I think it's worth noting because people I would say this to Democratic operators I trust, I like and respect. And I'm like, I don't think Joe's going to win. And they're like, no, he's going to pull it out. Don't you worry. And I was like, what numbers are you seeing there?
That we are not seeing. No.
And so right now, Trump is winning in the polling averages in Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia. He's also he's made Florida and Ohio no longer swing states. So he takes those. And then Pennsylvania he's technically winning, but it's more of a toss-up.
It's a toss-up, yeah.
Depends on the poll, right? Now, they're not landslides, but they're strong. Arizona's looking stronger every day. Wisconsin looking a little stronger. North Carolina looks essentially locked, and so does Georgia, right? He doesn't win all of them. Like he can take it with one of Wisconsin or Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, pretty much. That'll do it for you. So, now to your point on the things being baked, what I don't know is what swing voters in those 6 or 7 states, if it's baked for them. I don't know that.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Probably on Mondays, but hit that bell, and thank you. North Carolina is a Democratic wish. They lost by 1.5 points in 2020 in the presidential. The demographics, they say, are shifting their direction. People are moving to North Carolina. The numbers I saw were Trump +9. I was in North Carolina recently, and the people in North Carolina were like, "Yo, I'd like to be a swing state. I don't think we're a swing state."
Yeah.
So I think NC is a head fake /
Texas turning
dream
blue
for the Dems. I think Joe Biden's going to have a very tough time in Michigan. The Arab American community is maybe 5% there, and the Arab American community are out on Joe. And the numbers I saw have him down 8 in Michigan.
Yeah,
and Gretchen Whitmer is up some number of points. So I think Michigan's going to be very tough. I think Georgia, what I saw was -8. Arizona, -5 or 6. I think it's going to be very, very tough for Joe to win in the battleground states that he needs. If the numbers stay where they are through at the end of April, I think there's going to be a mild panic. And look, if someone asks me, it's like, hey, do the Dems have a master plan to switch out the candidates? I do not think they do. But if we get into June, July, and it looks like Joe's going to lose, like the last realistic opportunity for there to be any change is the convention in August. So that there is like a...
What do you think they'd do? Like they'd have to give it to Kamala, which I think is worse, right?
I think even if they're losing, I think they still say, hey, Joe's our guy, and the numbers be damned. In part because of some of the things you just described, which is I talked to a lot of Dems too, and they're just like, oh, Joe's going to win. And the two things they say are Trump and abortion. And I'll be like, look, I'm not a fan of Trump, and I'm a huge fan of women's reproductive rights. But there was a focus group that really hit the point home for me. It was actually an independent voter in Wisconsin. I believe he was a welder. And he said, he voted, by the way, for Trump and then Biden. So he's like very, he's your guy.
Yeah,
more or less.
Timeout.
And he said he's going to vote for Trump. And then said, when people asked him about Trump is a threat to democracy or being a bad leader, he said, I'm just going to turn the TV off for 4 years and enjoy his economy.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I said, oh my gosh, there's going to be a critical number of independents. Most of them, by the way, most of these voters we're talking about in these swing states, probably not college grads. So if you're looking at like a group of independent voters like that welder in Wisconsin who would just be like, you know what? I remember the Trump economy being good. I'm not digging this economy. I'm just going to, ignore the back and forth and just vote for who I think is going to do a better job in the economy. Which, by the way, Trump is up on the economy among independents by something like 24 points. So to me, like everything the Democrats talk about, to me, it's like, look, if you're convincing that guy, I'm into it. If you're not convincing that guy, I'm not into it. And the Democrats I talk to do not seem singled out on that type of voter.
Let's talk about the economy a bit because it's related to it. It's one of the reasons I think Joe's not going to win because the economy is, they're saying the economy is good. But,
Oh, another thing is like a bunch of business types are now already preparing for a Trump return. I mean, I don't know if you're seeing this stuff.
oh, they're prepping for like lower taxes or whatever it is.
Or they're trying to regain favor with the crew.
Yeah,
I mean,
back.
it's they're already acting. It's like, and they're not saying, oh, he's going to win, but many of them are saying it's like a strong possibility. And by the way, I do not want Trump to win, and I'm doing things to try and keep Trump from winning. But we're just describing one reason why we supported Dean and our honest take of the situation.
Well, I think the only value, not the only, but one of the biggest values you and I have is like we're not on a team, and most of these places are on a team, and so therefore they end up restricted in what they say. We could give zero shits about teams. And that's a real thing you should know.
I'm on team civilization is what I say.
Yeah, team humanity.
Team humanity, team good people, good things for people.
So the economy to me, you're told inflation's going down and jobs are going up, but I don't know if anyone's lived experience reflects that.
I ran a Twitter poll the other day.
Always an accurate slice of America.
Yeah, I know, but it was just like, hey, is the economy great, good, okay, or poor? And it was, I think maybe 15% said it was great or even good, and maybe like 70% had it in like the fair or poor. And I think, by the way, that's pretty consistent with what any poll is saying on the economy. Like there aren't a lot of people being like, it's great.
It's amazing. I'm not wonky enough to fully understand this, but we used to calculate inflation differently prior to 1983. And if you use, or CPI, Consumer Pricing Index, we used to calculate that differently before 1983. And if you use the pre-1983 calculations, inflation's a lot higher.
Is it because of housing?
Yes, it's the housing rent. It's called...
That's what's making everyone freaking miserable. Is housing is unavailable or unaffordable.
Owner's equivalent rent, OER, is what's called, and what we used to use, or we use now. And
look at Zach doing all his homework.
Which I don't fully understand it, but it did. To me, I'll give you an example. My wife and I are moving in Manhattan. Now, Manhattan's its own behemoth.
Yeah.
But it's somewhat reflective of certainly broader markets and real estate markets. And so we're renting. We looked at both. Looked at buying, looked at renting, because we're like, you're spending so much money a month. To get a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, not even guaranteed 2 bathrooms, so 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment in Manhattan, over 800 square feet. And I don't know how often y'all measure square feet in your daily lives, but this is still small. It's like 800 square feet is like the amount of space Carly and I are willing to tolerate as individuals in our home, right? And it's small. That is baseline, cheapest you'll find, $7,000 a month. Baseline.
Ooh,
and that, God
really?
forbid you want
oh my gosh.
a doorman. And I don't mean like a fancy doorman to greet you like they do in Home Alone. I mean someone that's just keeping the door, like gets your packages and like is at the door at all times for like deliveries or intruders, etc. We're not talking about a fancy lobby. Let alone you want washer and dryer in the building or in the unit. And so from there, you have to compromise a variety of things. You get smaller. Like we could find some for 5 to 6, but they're rare and they've got massive problems like no lighting or XYZ. So yeah, man, it's brutal in Manhattan. And then you're like, okay, well, if you're going to spend $7,000 a month, you might as well buy something so you're owning it. And the rates are pretty tough here. And Manhattan real estate doesn't look like it's going up. So I was talking to this guy, my buddy, he works in like wealth management, investment advisor, and he's like, pretty much any investment, if you put $100,000 into a New York City apartment, he's like, whatever I could pretty much take any other investment and outperform that over a couple of years. Like it's probably one of the worst like investments to make from a return standpoint. Now it's good if you're renting it out and other things, but if you're just owning it and locking it up. Anyway, that's just one example. That's Manhattan, like boohoo, Manhattan tears, no one cares. And maybe.
Well, it's like a
brutal
microcosm of things that are, it's like I'm friendly with some young people who are upstate and they're priced out of buying any home. Like it's a young couple, exactly that couple that you'd think should be like, buying a starter home.
Yeah, they're working. They're both making is dinks, right? Dual income, no kids.
And then starter homes are way out of reach because mortgage rates have shot up, and so the monthly nut on a mortgage is just way too high, and housing prices have not come down to a point where so they've given up.
Yep.
And so they're like that is the norm.
Median income in the United States about $75,000. Median home price 470, 468, somewhere on that range.
That's for a couple, right? 75.
Household income, yes.
Yeah, household income.
Median household income, and then median household price is 470 or so, 468. And then in 1985, the median income, household income was about 25 grand, and the house is like 85 grand. There's a ballpark, you give or take some numbers there, but the problem is you get these houses and like, you know, based on your income, you got to work the rest of your life to pay it off. And if the housing market's not great, like what is it worth at the end of the day, right? It's tough.
You're getting me in a bad mood, and so that's why
Sorry.
Americans are in such a bad mood about a lot of these things.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you include housing in inflation, inflation would look much, much worse, and that's probably the lived situation for most Americans. I think that's going to be one of the major problems. Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast, you just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Now, again, I don't want Trump back. I was just in Pennsylvania supporting a couple of awesome forward candidates for Attorney General and Treasurer, who I think will draw in some really rational voters who I'm going to say are not going to be Trump voters. So we have this reverse coattails theory of November where we boost local sane candidates and in swing states like Pennsylvania, and then they draw in some sane voters who are not going to be pulling the lever for Trump. And then you do that enough times, and then maybe you help avert disaster. So,
you're talking about on the margins, man. You're talking about 1,000 votes matters. Yep.
Exactly. Because is in 2020, despite the 7 million vote difference in the popular vote, the real gap was 50,000 votes in 3 key swing states.
Some of these candidates knock on 10,000 doors and win 1,002 voters.
Yes. So if you look at this contest in November, it probably gets decided by between 1 and 200,000 voters in 3 or 4 of the states that we're talking about. And so if we forward were to enlist 100 local candidates in these swing states and they each got 50 to 100 sane voters to show up that might not have voted otherwise, which could be a thing because some people are just going to be like, yeah, I'm out, because they're disheartened by selection. Now they're like, oh, I want to show up to support that person I like. So we could boost the non-Trump vote by 5 to 10,000 voters in a system that's going to get decided by 1 or 200,000. And we can do that on a price tag in the low millions in a system where we're going to spend $10 billion beating each other up. So this is a very high leverage, high impact way for us to be positive and helpful. And so if that sounds like a good plan to you, do go to forwardparty.com and support us in any way you can. So I'm taking action to reduce the chances of Trump winning. But one reason I'm doing it is because I think there's a real chance he does win.
Let me ask you this.
That's like the.
This is so 6 things that bother me: education, healthcare, housing, the big 3 that piss people off, and then to me it's AI, climate change, and just poverty in general.
Yeah, poverty.
Do any of these guys, let's say Biden or Trump, do either of them fix them? Like what makes it? Like which one moves it forward faster or better?
My new fixation is the enhanced child tax credit because it did such a good job reducing child poverty.
Which means we should spend money on probably Humanity Forward and Liam.
Oh, yeah. And I'll have Liam on, Liam DeClivelo.
Which is our lobbying friends.
Yes,
lobby for the people.
They literally, I mean, I can't wait to have Liam tell some of his stories because they literally show up in members of Congress office being like, you know what people don't like? Child poverty, poor kids. They don't like it. You do something about that, they'll like you more.
Well, lobbying works, right? It's effective.
Yes.
It's not, I don't bribery is not the right term, but it's,
heck, our system is
messaging.
institutionalized bribery at this point.
Yeah,
So you might as well bribe people to try and reduce poverty. So if you look at these things, AI, climate change, poverty, you could throw immigration in there.
Oh, that's a big one. That one will get fixed, I think, under Trump.
It'll get fixed either way. As soon as Congress decides to not freeze it up based upon the election in November, I think we'll see a bill either way. I mean, a lot of time is being wasted.
I do hate. I think to me, what bothers me some of the most about politics is the Democrats had majority House, majority Senate, and Joe Biden. And they ran on codifying Roe v. Wade, and they didn't. They just didn't. Why? Because it was more beneficial to run on it in the midterms and the general than to actually do it. Because if that bill hits the floor, there's not a single Democrat that can ever win re-election by voting against it. It's one of those black and white issues. And that's where it's all right, they maybe don't care. So let's talk about positive things, man. It's April Fool's Day. It's my wife's birthday. It's Carly's birthday, April 1st.
Wow.
Which makes it kind of checks out. Carly, you're oh, April Fool's Day, you were born. That someone checks out. So my thought was,
you play all sorts of jokes on her every year for her birthday.
I know. I got to troll her a bit on her birthday. I figured out. So I wanted to, since you've run for office, a lot of things you ran on are now, it's really exciting. Not just somewhat popular, mainstream front page news and challenges. I don't know, you don't always have the opportunity to talk about it on your own podcast, oddly, unless you want to rant and rave, which isn't your thing. So I'm going to let you rant and rave, or at least answer. So let's start with AI, which I think Andrew Yang on AI is always exciting to me. NVIDIA, which, Lord, I wish I bought them earlier. That stock has done very well. They just announced that they have AI nurses now that cost $9 per hour to, let's call it, execute and serve patients. And the median nurse pay in the United States is $39 an hour. And that's just one example of thousands we're starting to see in AI getting better and better. But here's my question. We had talked about, you have cognitive and non-cognitive roles, and you have repetitive and non-repetitive roles. And you had talked about cognitive repetitive was most likely to get replaced, particularly for white collar workers and those and when you talk to the wealthy members or high school or college graduates in the United States, that's the biggest one they were concerned about. But do you still agree with that? Because things have changed. Because I think nursing would be a cognitive, non-repetitive job. There's some creative aspects to being a nurse, right? The patient care and bedside manner. What do you think?
Happily, obviously AI is not going to change your, flip your body over and, bathe you in your hospital bed if you can't move. So some of it is rules based. You can imagine nurses trying to get you to take meds, and that stuff can probably be automated. I'm even more concerned about it now than I was. I get more concerned about it with each passing day. I don't rant and rave about it that much because there's nothing I can do about most of it right now.
And you did your ranting for a while.
And I spent years with you trying to be the Paul Revere of AI and automation. And now a lot of people have picked it up. It is true that if you were to make a list of things, and I get this online sometimes, so thank you for those of you who do this, because I do see it sometimes, is that, hey, you remember when Andrew Yang was talking about AI years ago? It's hey, you remember when Andrew Yang was talking about trying to move coastal environments, and people yelled at me about that. It's because it was climate change defeatist, and now it's oh yeah, that's you remember that?
I remember people used to call them, you were making hot takes, and you're these are not hot takes. This is this is like actually a conservative take based on the numbers. Pretty common, you know what I mean?
So occasionally someone will lob something into my feed, reminding folks. I was talking about boys and men back then.
And I have a couple of this list. Yeah, I have a whole bunch: social media regulation, etc. What's scary, or what's?
And I'm glad. I mean, I'm never someone who, like frankly, if I say something and then other people grab hold of it, I'm just happy. I'm not like, it's like, I said that 6 months before you did. I mean, who gives a shit? Like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's all about trying to solve it. The things I'm grinding away on, I mean, it's so poverty, and I posted this the other day, but I think poverty strikes me as the most solvable of the major problems. And if you solve for poverty, then you can solve for a lot of the others much more easily. So the thing I'm chasing right now is the enhanced child tax credit, because it's such a clear win. I had John Avlon on the other week, and he is trying to bring back the child tax credit. I was like, that is exactly what we should be doing. Yep. So I get animated, and this is, by the way, a feature of mine, and also something of like a weakness. Is I get excited if I think I can do something about it. So let me chase that one down. But I am glad that a lot of the big things we ran on are now accepted mainstream wisdom, I think.
Yeah.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. I have always been a mattress guy. I thought if you're going to spend 8 hours doing something, you should pay attention to what you're doing it on. That's why I love the Helix Sleep product. It is made for me. I am someone who sleeps on my back. I do not sleep hot. I like a firm mattress. And so when I took the Helix Sleep quiz, I wound up with a Helix Dawn model. And it's been fantastic, not just for me, but for my kids who seek it out of the entire house. Don't want to take my word for it? Helix has been awarded the #1 mattress pick by GQ and Wired magazine, and they have a 100-night free trial and 10 to 15-year warranties baked in. That's confidence in your product, and if you get on a Helix Sleep mattress, you will see why they are so confident. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang and use code HelixPartner20. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now.
Another topic you were leading on was the impact of smartphones on our kids. You told me before I took the job with you, you said I had to read your book, I had to read iGen, which was the term for Gen Z before they became Gen Z. It was basically about the generation that got a smartphone and social media in middle school. And you've talked to Jonathan Haidt. You've talked to a lot of folks about what this is doing. Scott Galloway talks a lot about this.
Jonathan has a new book out right now.
All about this.
Generation.
All about this.
Which is done in concert with Gene Twenge, who wrote iGen.
That's right.
So and Jonathan will probably be on the podcast shortly talking the anxious generation.
So perfect. So Florida just banned social media for kids until you're the age of 14, and then you need permission from a parent or guardian at age 14 and at age 15, and then you can do it when you're 16. If you talk to most, I'm going to say parents that have seen the data are unanimously in favor of this.
Yep.
The brightest families, the tech entrepreneurs who create this crack cocaine from middle schoolers, they're like Chamath, who made his money on Facebook.
Don't use it.
And like he's like, I'm not doing my kids that. Like, that's a good example. Thoughts on this? To me, it's like the sign of the times. Like, it's going to happen. I had a friend that said it's going to be like, social media will be like cigarettes today, where they're like a stigma and they're banned until you're an adult.
I'm a follow the data guy and a Jonathan Haidt guy.
Yeah.
I think that's a fine approach. Limit it from, what's the age in Florida?
14. And then eventually.
That's a place to start drawing a line. I don't see why a 12 or 13-year-old. I've got kids who are 11 and 8, and they aren't going to be on social media anytime soon. And if they were, I'm sure their lives would not be better for it.
Yeah. My question, like, we don't have a good track record in the U.S. on banning things. seemingly, I'm curious your thought. It seems like I'm not an expert in this, but we seemingly have a good or above average track record on age restricting things.
Dude, you know the big one that's going to be
Gambling.
Yes, that's exactly right, dude. I mean, did you see the NBA player just got busted for prop betting on himself?
Yeah, and what's his name? Otani?
Oh, and Otani's interpreter. I mean, we don't know what's going on there.
Alleged. You have to say the word allegedly so we don't get sued for things.
Yeah. Jonte Porter, the NBA player who allegedly made prop bets
on himself,
and then would just pull up in the game being like, oh, I don't feel so good, and then just go to the bench and thus be under all of the prop bets. Allegedly.
But of course
Sorry,
this would
Jonte.
happen. Like we not rushed into it, but we just went. It went from gambling's illegal to gambling's everywhere, right?
Oh my gosh, have we? I mean, okay, first let me say that I totally use one of these sports gambling apps, and I don't post about it.
I made so much money this week. I will say this, I made a ton of money this weekend on UConn and Duke on March Madness. And I will say this, UConn is a cheat code for those of you who are gambling advice. UConn they were a cheat code last year. They're a cheat code this year. They're the best college basketball team I have ever seen, maybe since Duke 2001. They're fantastic.
Gambling guidance with Zach Grauman. The new
just hammer their halftime overs, hammer them the spread. They're just going to beat teams to submission. They're fantastic.
They are awfully good.
And I'm from Connecticut. This isn't a bandwagon thing. I have a very complex college basketball relationship because I grew up a UConn Huskies fan, and I went to Duke, who was the demon. We hated Duke growing up, and now I'm oddly I love both. That's very complicated.
I mean, obviously you go to Duke, you love Duke. You know what's funny is being friends with you and working with you these years, and I have other Duke friends too. I used to dislike Duke pretty intensely. Now
they deserve it. I mean,
we've been friendly with JJ Redick.
I love JJ Redick. Bro, you were really hated.
Really hated now.
He knows it.
Yeah, and
He's a smart guy.
But now I have positive feelings about Duke because I hang out with you a lot. I hang out with other Dukies, I can see that UConn. I think I might have in our pool.
UConn's pretty awesome, yeah.
UConn winning, but the sports networks have just embraced gambling at such a high level. I mean, there's literally ESPN Bet now.
Yes.
The sports leagues. You remember the days when at least the NBA was no franchise in Vegas because it's too close to the sports books, and now you don't hear much about that now.
They're all too much money.
Gambling has now gotten layered through our sports and our media. And I will say, as someone who does do it and enjoys it, to your point, but can I imagine a gazillion teenagers going down some kind of addictive online gambling path and end up losing money that they probably should be doing something else with? Obviously. And that's really a thinker. If you can imagine legions of gambling addicts getting which is totally happening right now.
So, and I'm not just concerned about teenagers in this, I'm concerned about men. So
yeah, that's true.
I'm still really passionate about this and trying to find a way to, how do you help keep men strong and whole in order to protect women and girls? Because most of the problems that women and girls face are caused by weak men. And so when you have a society that's spitting out a lot of weak men that are addicted to substances and insecure and, I think the phrase toxic masculinity gets thrown around too much.
Tyler Cowen, the economist, said it like this, which I was like, huh. He said, every society has a, quote, bad men problem. It's what happens to the bad men
what are the bad guys
of society? And then also, by the way, how many are you producing? And where America has a
bad guy problem.
Has a bad guy problem.
And so I masculinity can be a very good thing, and used in excess or inappropriately, it can be very toxic. So there's and I think
there's Caitlin Flanagan calls it heroic masculinity.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
That is, by the way, the vision. It's positive, functional, heroic masculinity.
Yes,
is freaking fantastic. It's
of course. Strong men treat women well. That's what happens.
It's
right?
It's running into the freaking building and saving the person. Which, by the way, a UFC fighter did that last week.
Really?
A retired UFC fighter. There's a fire in his house, and he goes into the burning house and pulls out apparently both of his parents.
Oh my gosh.
And then he collapses from smoke inhalation and he's in the hospital.
Is he okay?
And then they put up like a GoFundMe and everyone just like threw money.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, Mark Coleman. Props to you, Mark Coleman. You're a fucking stud.
And,
but yeah, like that's positive masculinity.
Right. And it's not, but it's also like on a smaller scale, it's the man who was married to his wife, who's faithful to his wife or tries to be faithful to his wife, right? And treat her, but also if his wife is earning more, secure in himself, he's like, yeah, I'll take care of the kids because that's what's right for our family. Like that to me is positive. Like you can still be a strong man and let your wife be a strong feminist, right? I think we have this dynamic of black and white. Like if you're a strong man, you have to have a weak wife or you have to put your wife in her place. Like there's so much stuff.
God,
This is the traditional sort of, like dichotomy we've like kind of crafted on manhood, right? You have to be the head of your household and provide, and like it's there's different evolutions of that. So anyway, a long way of digressing on gambling. Like men suffer a lot of times alone or in silence, and it is getting harder and harder. And this is what I'm actually passionate about. I want to find more numbers on this, but it's getting harder and harder for men to make friends. And
yes,
and it's harder and harder for men to have real conversations. And this shit's biblical, man. Like iron sharpens iron, like one man sharpens another. Like men need that almost more so than women. In this, like women go seek it, but men don't. They'll suffer in silence. And my point on gambling is you could suffer in silence on gambling. You can, and you're going to have men.
How many
in
guys
the red
listening and watching this have had their weekend ruined because they lost some bets?
At me and Andrew on Twitter if you felt but then you're gonna have guys where it's not just like, oh, my play money. You're gonna have guys for their mortgage payments. And
totally.
Their family, and it's really sad and dark, and it's so easy. And like you saw this happen with Robinhood, the app with the stock markets, and plenty of men losing money on that, which made it easy. And gambling so different than it's a lot of people debate the stock market might as well be gambling, but it's a different sort of risk tolerance, excitement. You feel like you have control when you're gambling. You don't. House always wins. FYI, newsflash.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Going online without ExpressVPN is like changing while leaving your window wide open. You might not have anything to hide, but why give randos a chance to invade your privacy? When you go online without a VPN, ISPs can see every single website you visit, and they can legally sell this information without your consent to ad companies and big tech who can then use your data to target you and profit, not to your benefit, generally at your expense. So using ExpressVPN, it's like being a member of a high-tech company that's on your side, where they beam you into a server in another part of the world. No one can see anything you do. Just fire up the app, click one button, and you're beamed onto a completely safe, anonymized internet. They can't do anything with your data. I use ExpressVPN to have that peace of mind. To secure your online activity by visiting expressvpn.com/yang today. That's expressvpn.com/yang. And you can get an extra 3 months for free. expressvpn.com/yang. In the War on Normal People, I talk about time use studies where if a guy loses his job, he volunteers less than if he was employed, even though he has more time. So in theory, he should volunteer more. And so then you say, well, what happens to all that time? Video games, alcohol use,
pornography,
and gambling.
Oh, gambling.
So, just reinforcing the gambling. So you're right. It's not just a teenage thing at all. And if you go to one of the casinos and you see people plunking down their money and there's a joylessness to it, where you're like, some of these people should not be here, doing this thing. But, it's a lot of older people.
So now this is a long way back to where I was getting at. So when you ban something, it becomes a forbidden fruit. So to me, when I was growing up, alcohol was this forbidden fruit. Like you weren't allowed to have it. My parents were like, well, the law is the law. Like you're not going to drink till you're 21. And so when I acted up. I'm 17 years old. You're sneaking alcohol to a party in like a water bottle, and you're binge drinking in your like 1.5 hour window when someone's parents aren't home, which is really dangerous and unhealthy. And then kids get in cars and they scramble, or they go to the hospital, they drink too much, etc. So that's what the challenge of banning things at times, because people will get access to it quickly that one time and then they binge on it. Now, I think with social media, a lot tougher to binge in silence, right? Because you need an account, you need to experience it. It's like a whole, so I don't think you're going to have 15-year-olds, that's what you're talking about, the kids on the edge, right? 14, 15-year-olds. They'll try to have secret accounts, maybe, but it's going to be hard.
When you say secret accounts, I think of...
They'll pretend to be 18, right?
Think of like the burner accounts. You know, like that. I think it was the Sixers' old GM who had a burner account that just said good things about himself. It's like it ended up being... anyway. Part of social media. Yeah, part of social media is obviously...
Yeah. You said this when you're running. You said parents are outgunned. So in this sense, the government can theoretically be on their side, which should be helpful.
Anxious generation, Jonathan Haidt, he says phone-free schools. I'm like, yeah, minors should not be using this stuff. Yup. And I think if everything were to go beautifully, we might look back on this as a strange period where kids did use this stuff. And unfortunately, the data that John and Gene have found is pretty clear that we screwed up a generation, hence the anxious generation.
Do you think it's telling, I don't know, that we don't have, or I'll rephrase it, where is the Gen Z Zuckerberg, the young billionaire, the young entrepreneur?
This is actually a topic.
Do they exist? I don't think there are.
This is a topic out in Silicon Valley. Is there a saying? It's like, where is the next gen mega entrepreneur unicorn? And they are not seeing the next generation follow in these footsteps in various ways, and they think, like what's going on? And there are a bunch of thoughts behind why that is, but part of it is the makeup of this generation might be different, and one reason for that might be social media. There's some other reasons.
Do you think it's because there's like economic opportunity in the world? It gets harder and harder to make a new company now.
The dynamic has changed very quickly in Silicon Valley. We can talk about that too, but there are a number of reasons. I do think that some of the folks who might have built a really, really big company a generation ago, now they'll build a company that has promise and they'll get gobbled up by a big company. And so you don't hear about them because they haven't become, some famous
that's probably
CEO.
Right. I think that's part of it.
So it sounds like your parting words are going to be UConn wins the Final Four?
I think UConn's going to take this thing.
So you can send your gambling markers
at me.
To Zach. I'm going to say something somewhat contrarian.
Go for it.
I think Purdue wins.
Ooh.
And I put that in the gambling pool. In part, here was my logic.
Okay.
Was that if a team other than UConn wins, then I get to win. It was the thought, because I figured everyone would have UConn.
I was looking at that
too.
So
statistically, it'd be like, pick the non-UConn team. But also, I love the revenge tour motivation.
Yes.
Because I think it was UVA lost in the first round. They came back.
2019 where they lost.
So imagine like these Purdue guys like fucking stewing in this stuff.
They all came back
for 11 months, and they're just like grrr, and they have that eye of the tiger, and they're not screwing around, and they're just gonna, that revenge thing. It's one reason to bring it full circle is that I'm concerned about Trump winning. Is that is like the
just watch
like,
sports
like
distract us.
No, and that there's like this kind of compensatory mechanism. It's like the revenge game motivation. Like that. I think. But I'm going to say Purdue.
They certainly can win it. I think my prediction is my hot take is I think the Big East is going to roll the final. I think you have 3 teams, at least 2. Maybe 3 teams in the Final Four from the Big East. I think Marquette's going to make it. I think Creighton's got a shot.
Well, by the time this episode airs, you will know if Zach
and you'll be listening to this and be like, you idiot, Zach.
And then we'll have Zach back on. So
it was April Fool's. Just kidding. If I was wrong. If I'm right, you're welcome. Anything you want to close with, my man?
Thank you for taking on some of the biggest challenges, man, including my campaign, Dean's campaign, trying to help thousands at this point of underprivileged kids have better educational opportunities. And we'll have you back to talk about like the latest on the business. But you always want to do what you think is right. And it's awesome to have an opportunity to work with you.
Yeah, likewise, man. It's good. Like what I like about you and our friendship, man, we fight the good fight in our own way, And what I love about the Yang Gang and folks that have followed you and sometimes me over the years is that by definition you're listening to this, it's probably because you care. And I said in the beginning of the podcast, like as you get older, it gets harder to care about things, and everything in the world, anything a human's ever done, has happened because someone freaking cared.
Yeah, amen.
Someone like got off their butt and was like, no, this is not the way things should be, good or bad. So you have to, when you feel that emotion, you have to follow it.
This man followed it, and now he's married
Likewise.
to Carly Riley.
I'm married,
doing awesome stuff, paying too much for rent.
Yeah,
Care,
dude, sorry,
people. Be like this man.
I love you guys. Go Huskies. Go Duke.